Hello.
All right, I think we can hear you.
Okay. I'm so sorry. If there's going to be a technical issue, it's going to happen with me, though. I can tell you that.
That's all right. As long as it works, as long as you can take care of the presentation as well, I think we're going to be good.
Okay.
All right, wonderful.
Well, thank you all for joining me. This is Opening Silos with Communities of Practice. And today we're going to learn a little bit about who I am and where I come from, what are communities of practice, and then how you can start a communities of practice yourself. And we'll also look at a case study of the Red Hat communities of practice. But first, we'll start off with who I am. I am Tracy Buckner, and I am the program manager for the Global Communities of Practice at Red Hat. You can find me at this email address, but also feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have questions or want to talk about open source communities. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I grew up in a very small town in southern West Virginia, and I like to say that's where I first learned about community. I learned that there was always an open door. I could go next door and sit on the porch and talk with someone about my problems and collaborate with them. People are really transparent in small towns. They share lots of information with you. And you learn about meritocracy because you learn that whoever has the best idea is going to win, especially when it comes to things like barn raising or who bakes the best apple pie. So I got a really good start in community, but I really learned about the open source community when I came to Red Hat. I'd never worked at an open source company before, and so learning about the open source principles really excited me. I love that it's about meritocracy and that good ideas can come from anywhere. It doesn't matter where you sit on the org chart. What's important is your idea and that it's a good idea. I love transparency and the fact that we can all have access to the information and the materials necessary to do our job or to do a good job. We strongly believe in release early and release often. We believe that rapid prototypes can lead to rapid discoveries and that an iterative approach is always the best. We believe strongly in collaboration, coming together and sharing, and that's where the best ideas sometimes come from. If you have a problem, you may be so close to the problem you can't really solve it, but collaborating with somebody else can help you see a new idea and come up with a new solution. And all of these things really fall directly into community. Community is the central part of open source, and all of these are pieces and parts of community. And that's what I'm going to share a little bit more about today. When we talk about communities of practice, I want you to understand that at Red Hat, we do all of these things and we are open, but we're not perfect. We struggle too. And some of the struggles that we have, maybe you faced as well in your organization or in your communities, especially now with COVID, working from home, not in the office every day. People feel disconnected. They're disconnected from their team members and their coworkers. It's rough to constantly be online talking to people, not having the opportunity to sit in a room and have a conference with somebody. We also find that sales and service experts work with our customers, but they don't always communicate back the experiences that they have or the challenges that they face. Even the best practices, sometimes a sales or service person will come up with an idea and not share it back, so they're the only people that know that it actually works. And too often, our support and engineering team are only contacted when there's a crisis. They don't know when something goes well. They only hear about when there's a problem. And there's also a lack of sharing and communication across our business units, our locations, and our regions. All of these things are what we call silos in organizations. And I've constantly heard people saying, we need to destroy silos, we need to break them down. But I don't think that's a reality. I don't think silos are going to go away. People are naturally going to come in cliques, in silos, in groups. So my idea is that we learn how to open those silos. We learn how to share across the silos. And that's really where communities of practice come in. We address these issues at Red Hat through the global communities of practice. So what are communities of practice? We'll start at the very beginning in 1991 when they were first identified. Two anthropologists were actually studying group learning, which I find fascinating that they were looking at learning. They weren't looking at community really. But what they found out was that if groups of people come together and they have a passion for something, then they're going to learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. And you've probably seen this in your own life. Things like a book club. If you get together with a bunch of people who love books, they're going to interact and they interact regularly, they're going to learn more about books and they're going to become together as a community. The same thing happens if it's music or painting or sports. When you share a passion, you're excited about it, you want to learn more about it, you want to share more about it. That's a community. There's so many benefits to a community of practice inside of an organization. They connect people that may otherwise not work together. So it could be from 2 different departments, 2 different regions, even all the way across the world. And it enables dialogue. It gives them a chance to talk about issues or challenges. It's really a great way for them to come together. It also helps to stimulate learning. You can learn a lot of different things when you're with people that you don't normally work with every day. And it encourages collaboration. Like I was saying before, if you have a problem and you bring it to your community, they may come up with an idea that you never thought of before. And it gives you a chance to share your existing knowledge. You can become the expert. Maybe you have the best idea for how to do something, how to manage a project, or new code that you've written that works great and you want to share it with somebody. The community is a perfect opportunity to do that. And it can also benefit you as an individual. You can become a recognized expert in the field. People will be like, oh yeah, I know her, I know him. They come to my community. They have a problem, they know exactly who to go to. You can also become a thought leader. You can learn to write blogs or articles. You can speak at conferences. And it gives you a chance to upskill and learn how to do these things better by being with other members of the community that are passionate and that are experts about the topic. It gives you a chance for rewards and recognition. People are going to recognize your contributions and begin to reward you and recognize you. And it gives you a chance for career growth. I'm the perfect example of this. I started off as the community manager for the business analysis COP, and now am the program manager for the global COPs. So I've told you lots of things about communities of practice, and hopefully you're really excited to learn more and you're ready to start your own. I've defined a roadmap for you in just 5 easy steps. So let's start with the first one. Oh, let me go over them first, sorry. First, you want to obtain executive sponsorship, determine your mission and goals, assemble community leadership, determine your knowledge management and tooling, and then engage in regular communication. So let's start with the first one. Obtaining an executive sponsor. The community's management is really going to be focused on the day-to-day execution, the management of the community, the organization, and the structure. But you need to have an executive sponsor that is going to tie your strategy and your goals to the corporate goals. So you want to make sure that there's somebody that's in your corner that's willing to help you to create conditions of success for your community. They won't be there every day, but they'll be there sort of as a mentor and a guide for you within your organization. You also want to make sure you define your mission and goals. This is the number one thing that I find with my communities. I really have to pressure them. Why do you want to have a community? And somebody comes to me and they have a great idea to start a community, and I'm like, but why? What are you going to do? What's the impact that you're going to make? How are you going to give back to Red Hat or to the other communities? So it's important that you find your why and you make sure that your goals are actionable. Even in your community, you need to make sure that you come together and figure out what your why is. You also want to make sure you have good community leadership. I say a program manager only if you have a group of communities. We'll talk a little bit more about Red Hat's community structure, but a program manager is good because they can be the go-to person between you, the community managers, and the executive sponsors. Again, most of these people are volunteer, so it's good to have somebody that can go in between the managers and the executive sponsors. The COP managers are responsible for the daily activities, so they're going to keep your goals, your missions, whatever your objectives are. They're keeping you on target, and they're scheduling meetings, making sure that you have speakers or that you have organization in your community. And then there's a core team. I always tell everybody when you're starting a community, don't worry about forming that core team. It's going to rise to the top. The people that are the most passionate about this topic or the most interested in whatever you're doing with the community, they're going to do the most work and they're going to become your core team. They're going to want to support the managers. It's also a great opportunity for people who are new, maybe new developers, new architects, new consultants. It's a great time for them to get involved and maybe not be a manager, but need mentoring to become a manager. And then finally, you're going to have your members. There's lots of different ways that members can participate. Some will just come and look at the content that's there. Some will look and contribute. And then you'll have others who kind of stay in the background, and we like to call those lurkers. I always think it's important that you nurture your lurkers, because your lurkers are the ones who can become your biggest contributors and even be on your core team if you nurture them and grow with them. Next, you want to select your knowledge management and tooling. I used to have a list of open source knowledge management and tooling, but that just led to lots of chatter in the chat. So I'm just going to tell you that there's lots of opportunities for knowledge management available, and that you really need to choose what's best for your organization. We use a variety of different things to organize our content right now. We're searching for one centralized tool to help us manage that. But I think what's important is that you remember to get the root out, ROOT. And that means making sure that your content isn't redundant, obsolete, outdated, or trivial. Make sure that your content is important to the users and useful for them now. When they go to the community, they don't want to find content that's from 2 years ago. They need to know now what to do and how to solve their problems. What's the best practice? So make sure that you keep the root out of there. And finally, what I say is most important in a community, and I just heard it in the last conversation when we were talking about project management in communities, and that is making sure that you engage in regular communication. And communication can happen in a variety of different ways in a community of practice. It can be a regular meeting. We recommend at least one meeting a month. Through email groups, through chat. Actually, chat is probably our #1 way of communicating. We have hundreds of members in our chat groups, and it's a way to go and get a quick answer from an expert or to share your ideas quickly with the entire community. But I also like face-to-face, being able to look at somebody on the camera or sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and share your information face-to-face. It's just important that you're constantly looking for ways to communicate and to stay engaged with your community. So I've said a lot about communities. Let's see an example of what communities look like at Red Hat. Communities of Practice started at Red Hat about 8 years ago, and they started within the services organization. This is our organization that has our consultants and our architects, and at the time, that's the only place where we had communities of practice. As the years have progressed, we added a few new COPs, we increased awareness across the company, and membership began to grow, and we started to develop some best practices. We have now increased participation outside of services to include all of the organization and all of the regions, so we are global communities of practice. We've also introduced governance and a rewards and recognition program for our community members. Currently, Red Hat has 50 communities of practice, and we have about 100 community managers. That is in all 4 regions. And I like to say by adding our communities, our managers, and the regions, what we're doing is we're enabling full circle feedback. We have members and managers from every organization within Red Hat. And this really offers up an opportunity for us to communicate and to provide each other with information, best practices, challenges, solutions. It's just a great way to innovate and collaborate. This is just a quick look at the communities of practice at Red Hat. You can see that the top 3 categories are more technically aligned, whereas the bottom 4 are a little less technical. We've actually seen the most growth this year in our vertical communities of practice. We started off with just 1 this year, and now we've expanded to quite a few. And I really think that that is because that's what business is calling for. So our communities are mimicking the business. But there's lots of non-technical communities. We have project management. We have learning and development. We have a lot of different communities of practice. Some of the biggest lessons learned as COPs is that without an incubation period and a defined success criteria, failure is likely. So when somebody comes to me and wants to start a community of practice, they're immediately placed in a 90-day incubation period. And during that 90 days, they have an opportunity to define their goals and mission, to make sure that they have managers across all regions and they have a plan of communication across all regions. And then I sort of hold their hand for the first 90 days, making sure that they're getting their communication outline, their chat, their mailing list, and everything set up. If you build it with content, they will come, maybe. So what we've learned is that you have to evangelize. It's constantly talking about the communities of practice. It's constantly evangelizing them and let people know what the content is out there. And you need to understand the journey. So you're going to have lurkers, consumers, contributors, and make your what's in it for me very clear. This is give back. This is volunteer. So you want to make sure that everything is clear to them. And incentivizing for contribution. Do you want to give them the carrot or the stick? I mean, you could just say do it because you see the value, but what we found is that offering them rewards actually encourages people to contribute more. I see one of the questions in the chat is, so what's the focus? Like, what are you doing? And that's a great question that leads right into what I'm saying here. These are some of the things that our communities have done. Our open source enablement community conceptualized and created the story of open source for beginners that's being used by our sales and services team every day when they're working with our customers. Our security team recently worked because there were lots of questions about the classifications, security classifications last year. So they created videos and filmed that they were able to send out and share with others. We documented an install process in our cloud COP. It was costing hours of support time. So we had consultants and sales associates that were at the customers calling back to the engineers for help, who were calling our support people for help. And it was just a constant circle of trying, who knows what to do, how do I fix this? And we were able to document that within the COP and save thousands of hours and stop causing delays for our customers. We've also collaborated with our engineers to improve automation. At one point, automation sort of had their own group, and then we had our community, and they weren't conversing together. But now the two have come together, and it's making the automation design go much faster. So if the consultants and the salespeople are on the ground and they're seeing what people need, they're able to immediately send that feedback back to the engineers, and the engineers are able to communicate to the salespeople and the service people what's going on so that they're able to share that with our customers. And finally, we provided support to our open source teams that were working on solutions and initiatives for the global pandemic. So we've been working strongly with organizations that support COVID and with open education resources. So our communities are constantly busy. They're always doing something, sharing their information and their knowledge. I hope that you can see some of the benefits that our communities provide and that you're excited to start a community of practice to share your innovations or your ideas. If you'd like to start one, again, these are the 5 steps to starting it. That'd be finding your executive sponsorship, defining your mission and goals, assembling your leadership, defining your knowledge management and tooling, and then engaging in regular communication. So my call to action for you all is just to share the power of community. I think the open source community has a real strength, and we need to share that with everyone. And ignite the passion within people to come and share and give back, engage, inspire, and just lead others to do the same. I feel like I talked really fast and I said a lot. So are there any questions that I can answer? I'll check in the chat too. Okay, well, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time, and please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, or you can always reach me at my Red Hat email as well. So thank you, and thank you, Vladimir, for helping me. Sorry about the technical issues.
No problem at all. It was great having you here. All right, if there are no more questions, I would like to invite everyone to As we finish out this time slot, either join track 3 for a panel entitled Encouraging Diversity in the Workplace, or track 1 for McCoy Smith's I Am a Lawyer, Lessons from 20 Plus Years of Open Source Lawyering.